Hello everybody, it's Mr. McNally. This is the last of our presentations in ecology, and we're going to be continuing with where we left off with the food chains. This was the last slide of the last presentation, and I just want to remind you that we always start a food chain with a producer, like a plant like grass or a tree, and then from there we have our primary consumers or herbivores that get their energy from eating the producers. And from there we move on to secondary consumers or carnivores, which get their energy from eating the primary consumers. And then that moves to a top predator who eats the secondary consumers. So we have this straight line of energy, the most being at the beginning, and then it decreases but moves forward through the food chain till it ends up at the top predator, and then all the organisms will be decomposed by bacteria, by funguses, and other organisms of decay. So this is like a straight line, but today we're going to make this a little bit more complex because, as you know, there are probably more animals that eat these grasshoppers besides frogs. So there could be birds that are also getting energy from the grasshoppers. Or there could be snakes, and there could also be other animals besides the raccoon that eat the frog. And there's probably deer and rabbits and things that also eat the grass. And also, the raccoon probably doesn't just eat the frog, he's probably also gathering berries, and he's probably also eating small rodents like mice and anything else he can get his hands on. So even though the food chain is a good model, there's a better model. And we call that the food web. And a food web is really just a interconnected group of food chains. So a food web is many food chains that get interconnected. It kind of starts looking like a spider web where everything is joined. It's more complex, and complex means complicated. It means there's more paths of energy. There's more different types of food for the organisms to consume. It's more accurate because the food relationships exist between many organisms in nature. Just like you don't always have pizza for dinner, the animals in the ecosystem don't always eat the same prey or the same plants. So most organisms, most species are adapted to eat a variety of foods. So a food web can show you that better than a food chain. And it shows how the loss of one organism can affect the others in the web. So if we have a food web that contains rabbits and the rabbits disappear, well, then you're going to see the effect of the loss of rabbits on the predators, maybe the fox or the bobcat or some other animal, a hawk, that would eat those rabbits. So a food web will show you how things will react. And just like in a food chain, the arrows show the direction of energy. The arrows point to whoever receives the energy from that relationship. Here's an example of a food web. So we have two producers, not just one. We have the cattail plant and we have the marsh grass. And the crickets are eating primarily cattails and the grasshoppers are eating primarily marsh grass. The shrew can eat both of those types of insects. And the shrew gets eaten by not just the hawk, but also by the snake. And the snake is also eating the frog, and the hawk is also eating the snake. So you can see that there are several different food webs, food chains within one food web, and they all interconnect. Here's another example of a food web showing you that species rely on multiple different organisms, not just one. And this one is nice because it shows you that these brown arrows, that everything in the food web gets decayed by bacteria and decomposers like fungi when it's all said and done. The next part of our study of ecology is called symbiotic relationships. Symbiotic means working together or living in close connection with other species. It's a relationship between two organisms in which at least one benefits. Now this is different from a mother and a baby polar bear, or between a pair of mates like two wolves that are mated together. This is relationships of different species. So it's not the same type of animal or organism. It's two different species of organisms that choose to live together because one of them will benefit at least. And we have three types. And this slide will just give you the definitions, but then we'll see some good examples that will make it easier to understand. The first type of relationship is called mutualism. And if something's mutual, it means it's equal to both. So both organisms will benefit. So an example of this is you have bacteria that live in your intestines, and the bacteria love living in your intestines because that's where they get their food. The food that you consume winds up in your intestines, and the bacteria get some of it. But it also helps you because by them consuming some of that food, they're helping you do digestion, which releases more nutrients for you as well. So that's mutual. So the bacteria likes you, and you like the bacteria. The next type that we learn about is parasitism. A parasite, you've probably heard that word before, a parasite is something that is actually harming the other organism. So one benefits and one is harmed. An example would be a tapeworm or a worm. If you've ever had puppies, they get worms. So the tapeworm lives inside of you and eating your food, but they don't give you anything back. They just take your food. Unlike the bacteria that actually help you, the tapeworm is just robbing from you. So the parasite is very happy. The human is going to be negatively affected. And the last type is called commensalism. And what makes this one different is, just like with parasites, one benefits, but unlike the parasite, the other one doesn't get hurt, but he also doesn't get a benefit. He's unaffected. So we'll see an example of the sharks and the little fish later in the next couple of slides. So we have mutualism where they're both happy, parasitism where one is happy and the other one is sad, and we have commensalism where one is happy and the other one doesn't care. It's like, whatever. So the first one is mutualism. We see some pictures here. So it's a relationship in which both organisms benefit. And an example here is the bee and the flower. So as you probably know, bees make honey, and they get their honey by getting the pollen from the flowers. So this is feeding the bee. The bee is very happy because he's getting fed. But the flower is also happy because what this bee is going to do is take the pollen, which is the sex cell, the gametes or the sperm cell of the flower, and then it's going to fly to another flower and transfer those gametes, those sperm cells, to another flower, which will produce a seed. So the flower is getting pollinated, or it's getting a chance to sexually reproduce because the bee is helping it. So they're both happy. This picture is showing you an alligator and a little plover bird. The plover bird you would think is about ready to get eaten, but that doesn't happen. Although the alligator would probably eat almost any other animal that crawled across its path, he will not eat this bird because this bird is going to go in and do a dental cleaning. It's kind of like a dental hygienist taking some floss. He's going to go in there and pick out all the bits of food that got stuck in the teeth of the alligator and kind of clean his teeth, which is good because if the food stays in your teeth, eventually it leads to decay and cavities and you lose your teeth, which would be very harmful to the alligator. So he lets the bird clean his teeth. So the bird's getting fed and the alligator's getting a good teeth cleaning. They're both happy, and that's mutualism. And as I mentioned before, in the human digestive system, there are bacteria that get a meal every time you eat, and it helps us get vitamin K and other nutrients from the food because the bacteria helps you break it down. So moving on to commensalism. And this is the one where one species is benefiting and the other one does not get affected. So the one that doesn't get affected is just like, whatever, I don't care. So the shark and the remora fish are the pilot fish. This is a shark and a remora, and the shark is swimming around in the ocean, and this fish sucks on, he's got a little suction cup on the top of his head to the bottom of the shark, and he gets a free ride. And every time the shark eats, bits of food get released into the water, and the remora can grab those bits of food. So that food that's floating around after the shark eats, the remora gets to eat. The remora doesn't do anything to hurt the shark. He's not like digging into his skin. He's not taking any of the food that the shark would have eaten. He's only getting the leftovers that the shark wouldn't have bothered with. So the fish eat the leftover food from the shark's meal, and they also feed on the parasites on the skin. But the fish receives protection and a free ride, and the shark doesn't really care, doesn't get much from it. Same thing with these guys. They swim behind the shark. They're not near the dangerous end, okay? But when the shark eats, they get a free meal. The shark doesn't care. And the last example is called parasitism, and you guys have probably all dealt with one of these two parasites already. If you live on Long Island, you've probably been bitten by mosquitoes, and many of you probably bitten by ticks. It's a relationship in which one organism benefits and the other is harmed. Parasites are small and live off larger animals or hosts. An example could be humans with ticks, okay? And this could be, if you have dogs and cats, you probably seen them get ticks as well. So the ticks can feed off the blood of the human, and they could wind up passing on diseases such as Lyme disease. The tick doesn't want to make you sick. If the tick has Lyme disease, it's not his fault. It's a bacteria in his body that causes that. But if all the tick wants is your blood, he doesn't want to kill you because he wants your blood for as long as he can get it. The other type is humans and tapeworms. This is a tapeworm living in the intestines of a human or an animal, and it attaches to the intestines and sucks the food right out of the intestines, robbing you of those nutrients. And if you have a tapeworm, they live there. They could live in you for years, and they could just keep eating more and more as they grow and grow. And people with tapeworms have a hard time gaining weight and maintaining their own health because they're losing all the nutrients to the parasite. And the last one that's shown here is the human or an animal with a mosquito. And in this case, the mosquitoes feed on the blood of their host, kind of like the tick, cause you an itchy reaction. So you're negatively harmed, and the mosquito would benefit. And just like the tick, they can also transmit diseases, which is another problem. But they don't want to kill you. They want to come back and get your blood again tomorrow. But sometimes they transmit diseases that could be very harmful. So that's the end of the ecology notes. There is a short assignment today, and then on Thursday you're going to have a review of all of what we've learned to get ready for a test, which will be next week. And I'm signing off for the rest of the year. Mrs. Gonzalez is back. It was a pleasure working with you all, and have a great rest of your school year.